As I was watching this very important arc within One Piece, the Drum Island arc, I realized that there was a really important character that in the past I had overlooked, and that was Dr. Hiriluk. Dr. Hiruluk was one of the doctors of Drum Island who was able to escape Wapol for the majority of his oppressive rule on the Drum Island citizens and the medical profession. He was an old acquaintance of Dr. Kureha and someone who was kind enough to take care of Chopper when he was wounded and wouldn't have survived on his own. He was a quack, someone who studied medicine but wasn't very good at it. And he was a former criminal, a thief. On face value, none of these things really point to a character that would have such a profound impact on the story and be interesting enough to talk about. There are probably very few videos on Dr. Hiruluk, but I do think that this character is one that deserves a second look. Dr. Hiruluk, when he was young, was diagnosed with an illness that would eventually take his life, and without anywhere to turn for help, it was the vision of a cherry tree, a sakura tree that was so beautiful that it gave him an emotional and a spiritual experience, one so strong that he claimed his illness was cured. It was such a profound experience for him that he wanted to take this healing experience and proliferate it into the world, even to save his homeland, which was Drum Island. So he left a life of crime in order to become a doctor. Now, there isn't anything very remarkable about what Dr. Hiruluk actually accomplished in this time. He was seen as a quack because he wasn't very good at curing disease. As a doctor, he was savvy enough to teach Chopper the basics of first aid, but was known far and wide as a doctor that was likely to cause more harm than good. Yet Dr. Hiriluk was a champion for the sick, and a champion for healing. He wanted to heal something desperately within the world, within his home country. He wanted his snowy, icy home country to experience the fullness of renewal that comes from the sight of the cherry blossom tree that he had seen and had healed him. This is essentially his entire story. After this, Hiruluk found that his illness had returned and turned to taking his own life instead of allowing the illness to progress in a climactic scene against Wapol's regime. But what I think is missing from his story is something deeper that I pulled after watching the story of Dr. Hiruluk a second time. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, and one that I listen to fairly regularly is Mayim Bialik's Breakdown.
There are certain kinds of spiritual awakenings that can do instantaneously what many of us spend our entire lives trying to conquer and heal from.
She is a world-renowned actress, but also a neuroscientist. And in her work as a podcaster, she seeks to bridge science with faith, not just to understand and heal the body, but to heal the mind and the spirit. So many of her guests have been of the intellectual elite and have spoken about the most current innovations in science and technology. However, oftentimes she has guests on her show that tell stories about more esoteric journeys in which they change their lives from one of destruction and damage to ones of healing and health. They tell stories about NDEs and stories about supernatural experiences. One might tell the story of their ability to see angels and spirits, and another, like Betty Guadagno.
I would manipulate women, I'd get them strung out on drugs. If I was awoken, I know that something is happening on a big, large scale.
Who talks about her experience changing from an abuser and a drug addict to a healer and someone who champions the reformation and recovery of others. Oftentimes, the catalyst for the change that these people have in their lives are things that are traumatic or incredibly beautiful, like a vision or a dream, a gift that came from something outside of themselves that changed entirely and fundamentally and irreversibly their lives into something more in tune with the essential nature of what it is to be human and what it is to be good. There are plenty of other real-life examples of this thing occurring in the world, yet we only hear about them when these awakenings turn into nightmares by people who manufacture experiences to hold themselves up as spiritual leaders in cult-like fashion. Yet like the stories of old, like the angel that visited Joseph, or other figures in very old texts, these things occur on a regular basis within our world. Every day on the street, in the grocery store, at the office, in the courthouse, in the jail cell, people have spiritual awakenings caused by catalysts that turn their life from something dark into something bright. This is why Dr. Hiriluk on second watch is such an interesting character. Who he is not terribly important to the grand arc of the One Piece story and what it tells us about the Will of D, or the ancient bad that our heroes will fight at the end of the story. But Hiriluk is a very important character to Chopper, who is a main character and has been instrumental in getting the Straw Hat Pirates where they are. Dr. Hiriluk came to Chopper and chose Chopper and brought Chopper in because there was a time in his life when things weren't right. There was a time in his life when all he can do for himself or for the world around him was take and destroy. And when his body turned against him, he really had to face himself and ask himself the most essential questions about who he was and how life is supposed to be. And what he learned in a moment of extraordinary transformation created by a vision of a cherry tree is that some of the most profound and beautiful and healing things that you can do in this world is to change somebody's mind, to heal somebody's thoughts, and bring light into the spaces that are dark in the world. This is why Hiriluk devoted himself to a life of healing, to become a doctor, even though he was a quack, because even for what he could not accomplish on his own medically, he knew that there was a more essential virtue behind why he was doing what he was doing. He knew Chopper was a boy in pain and on his last legs. He knows that the sick and feeble need a caregiver. And most of all, he recognized that the deepest sickness that one can have is a sickness of the heart. And like the vision he saw that gave him life, the remedy to this, though difficult to receive, is the easiest to give and the most potent. Upon reflecting on the story of Drum Island and how medical professionals are so integral to the story, the way that Chopper was treated, the way that medicine was treated in this country, speaks very highly about why medical treatments are so important, why the field of medicine is so important to everyone, especially giving access to it. But it also paints another picture about healing the heart and true sickness, the sickness that would oppress an entire country, the same sickness of the heart that even caused Chopper to be viewed as a monster. It's not just the body that needs to be healed, says Drum Island. It's the heart that needs to be healed, the mind and the spirit. So I imagine that if this world was another, and Dr. Hiriluk was a part of the field of science and medicine, he might have had an appearance on Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. He might have been acknowledged on that podcast, not merely for his medical knowledge, probably in lieu of it, but in recognition to his commitment to healing and his mission to proliferate a universal balm that, when applied to the heart and mind, can heal anything.
I will save this country with my doctor's skills.